there's a walk for our organization called the Walk.
It's called what kind of walk?
July 12th, 10 a.m.
Okay. What kind of walk is it? What's it called again?
It's for our organization. It's called the Purpose Day Walk.
Okay.
And our purpose is to walk to change the stigma of not having parental support.
Oh, I love that.
And so that's what we walk for. And so I have it on social media, on our website. And it's our annual fundraising that we do for our organization.
Okay. And how long is the walk?
Actually, it's a 3K walk. We do 1.5 going into Michelle Obama Trail and 1.5 coming out.
Got you. Okay. I saw that on the website, and I definitely want to help you promote that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely want to help you promote that. So we're going to start from the top. I want you to just continue to be yourself because your story is so powerful. I love hearing you speak about it in your own words.
Okay.
And so what I'll do is I'll start with an introduction. So I have a podcast. This is the Pristine Par Above Par podcast. We're going to be talking with the wonderful Sybil Jones, who is the founder of the Daughters of Colette. And so I definitely want our viewers, our listeners, to have an opportunity to hear her powerful testimony, which is really like an example of how God blesses us according to our faith. Mm-hmm. You know, if someone is at the crossroads, if you're trying to decide if it's time to really walk in your purpose that God has put in your life, this is going to be the podcast you want to listen to. This is going to be for you. So I'll start by welcoming you, Sybil. Thank you so much for allowing me to interview you. Can you provide me with some background about how you got started and what motivated you to create what you're now doing as your life purpose?
Christine, thank you for having me be a part of your podcast. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate you doing the work that you do.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Mm-hmm. So how I got started with the Daughters of Colette was when my daughter came to me. She was a single mother, and she mentioned to me that she was going to move out and find her own place and like gain her independence. Mm-hmm. And I was okay with that. And so a little while longer, she came back and said, okay, Mom, I have a lease and I'm going to move out. And that's okay. You know, I was very happy for her, you know. And so she said, wait a minute, I need some furniture. I said, yes, you do. So my husband and I came together and we talked, and we were able to make sure she had all the furniture she needed to be in her house comfortably. Okay. And so the grandbaby had furniture. My daughter had furniture. They had kitchen table, chairs, living room furniture. And so after we got her set into the home, I came home to go to bed. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't sleep. I kept jumping up and thanking God that I had been here to help my daughter, that I was here to help her. Yeah. And I just couldn't stop. You know, I would try to lay back down, but I would get back up, just thanking God, you know, just like something was just over me. Uh-huh. And I recognized that. I just think it was his presence, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I started saying, what if I wasn't here? You know, and my thoughts started going that way. And then I said, well, what about the ones who don't have parents? Mm-hmm. But I ended up blurting that out. I was like, okay, Lord, what about the ones who don't have parents? And he was like, okay, this is your assignment. And I said, okay. And he called my daughter's name and said, she will be your mode. I said, my mode? He said, yes, your measuring stick on how you will run the organization. But prior to this, I always kept a journal on my bed. I always wrote down things, thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
and I was asked God, what am I here for? I know you have a plan for me. I just don't know what it is. So I asked him that for a whole year. So this night, when he said, this is your assignment, he started telling me they must be single parents, must have kids, must have their first time lease. He started giving me her life, and I was writing it down. So that's the outline that I use when I service the young single mothers. And so then after he gave me everything, he said, okay, now I want you to believe me for Furniture for a Nation. And I was like, a nation? And that word nation, that's a lot.
That is.
And it kind of like, fear started coming in. I'm going to be honest. Fear came in. And I was like, I got my bills, I got this to pay and stuff. So I started looking at myself, how I was going to accomplish it. And so I sat on it for many years, but God didn't let up on me. Yeah. He kept in my thoughts, in my dreams, about this organization. Yeah. And I just finally came to the decision, like on my birthday, July 10, 2023, to just surrender. Because he was in my thoughts every time I would go in the store and try to shop for myself. He was like, shop for others, shop for others. And I even did this. I was like, okay, I'm not even going to go to the store. Because it was like I didn't want to hear his voice, And I actually stayed out of the store for 3 months.
Oh, wow.
But God was like, okay, you want to play this game? We can play this game. And he still was talking to me. And I went back to the store and he was like, and I wrote it down in my journal. I told you to shop for others. And I was like, okay, Lord, okay. And so on my birthday, I felt like something was off. I felt like, how you start thinking about your life and everything on your birthday, just like stuff just hits you. And I said, okay, God, what is it that I need to do? Something is just off. And he was like, your assignment. And I was standing in my kitchen. I said, okay. Every year I was working on it. And I said, okay. I just lift my hands up and I said, I surrender my life to you. I'm going to go ahead and submit the paperwork to the state. And I'm not going to look back. Okay. And that's what I did. And so one day he woke me up, go do that 501c3. And I said, okay, how am I going to pay for it? He said, I'll provide it. And he did. And he even told me, he came to me in a dream to retire. He told me where I was working, it was dead. And he said, I've given you an assignment. Over here is your true identity. Over here, you'll find life. And I said, okay, I don't want to be in nothing dead. He even told me I was an imposter on my job. I'm like an imposter, So I just had to okay, Lord, okay. And so I kept going to work. Even after I had the dream, everything was all grayed out. And he has said, I gave you an assignment. I done gave you this assignment. But you got to choose it. We can just be after you. But you have to make a decision because you're a free moral agent. Right. He's not going to make that decision for you. And so I just remember, okay, I got to make a decision, And I didn't want to be in nothing dead. I want to be in things that's true and light. Have life in it. And so that's what I did. I said, okay. But I kept going to work because I was looking at that paycheck. And I was like, okay. And so one day I went to work on December the 6th. And I heard the Holy Spirit say, go in there and retire. I didn't have paperwork. I didn't have a retirement letter. I didn't have anything. I just knew God had spoke to me. Yes. And I was shaking, but I went in there and I obeyed God. And my manager was like, I want to retire. And the weight of it just lifted off of me at that moment. And I just had to walk it out. I just took a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it ever since and haven't looked back. I